Congrats, Will. So this is a speaker meeting. Our speaker will share his experience, strength, and hope for approximately 45 minutes. We ask out of respect for our speaker to please remain seated until he gets finished. It is my pleasure to introduce Doug.
Hi, my name's Doug. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety birthday is April 19th of 1997. And I feel very grateful, Mike. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be up here. I love to be of service. I love the fact that I get to be of service. I'm going to get a little bit into my background just for perspective on some things, but I think what's really important more so is the message instead of talking about me. So a little bit about my background. I was born in Japan, come from a heavily military family, rigorously devout Catholic family, and then grew up bouncing around all over the United States, lived in multiple states, went to Catholic schools my whole life. Come from a really rigorously, like I said, devout Catholic family, so there was a lot of structure, there was a lot of discipline, there was a lot of love, but it was also about stepping up and taking responsibility for yourself. I'm also third of 7 kids, so I also come from a big family. I had to change 1,000 diapers before I even graduated high school, and by the way, I went to a Jesuit all-boys college prep high school, and my parents made me pay for half of my tuition. So I had to work hard, get good grades, I played 2 sports, and I had to pay for part of my tuition. So I had to grow up really early. So for me, drinking was like a vacation in every bottle. I figured if I got drunk, you couldn't blame me of what was going to happen because I had to be so responsible when I wasn't drunk. So I started drinking when I was 14 years old. I went to a high school party with my 2 older brothers, and I was the only freshman at the party, and I figured, well, if I'm the only freshman, I got to show that I can hang with the big boys, so they'll invite me back. And I remember a 6-pack of beer, I remember 6 or 8 shots of Jack Daniels, and I don't remember the rest of the evening from there. I blacked out. But what I do remember is when I woke up the next day, there was this feeling of electricity. There was this feeling like this all made sense, and I'm wondering, why don't people do this all the time? Like this was the best experience I had had in my life up until that point. And so I stayed out of blackout binge drinker. Now, I had gotten sick that evening, I threw up, and for like the next year, just the thought of beer, if I smelled beer, if I saw a beer commercial, I would get like violently sick. So probably the wisest thing would have been slow down. And I just decided, well, I'll just go to hard alcohol. I mean, I'm not stopping, right? And so what ended up happening is I was a very high functioning, very good at hiding it drunk. I wouldn't drink during the week, but come the weekend, I'd black out, and who knew what was going to happen. It progressed until when I was getting ready to leave high school. I was in high school in upstate New York, and I was also supposed to go military, but I told my parents I want to go in a different direction. I told them I want to go become an actor. So 2 days after I graduated high school, I fly out to Southern California, and I decide to do a whole bunch of odd jobs and get to work as an actor because I also thought, hey, from what I've seen in the entertainment industry, they love people who party. So it's like, okay, this seems like it might fit in. But what happened over time is I got more depressed, I got more anxious, and I drank myself into a point where I was crawling out of my skin on a regular basis. Now, I was still high functioning. I decided to get out of the acting gig. I didn't want to be the starving artist anymore, so I went to work in the computer industry. And I went to work for a company that at that point in time was about 250 employees doing 300 million in sales. So it was a pretty good sized company. They started me as a box boy in the warehouse, and within 5 years I was VP, reporting directly to the owners. Because I was raised to work, and I know how to work, and I got after it. I got promotion after promotion after promotion, but what they didn't know halfway through that trajectory is I was still a blackout binge drinker. I was getting arrested on the weekends. I would wake up in jail having no idea why I was there. I got caught on top of a bank one time. So some friends and I went to drink at an Irish bar down in Newport Beach, and a couple doors down was a 2-story building. We thought it's a good idea while we're a little drunk. It's like, let's go climb this building. And so my friend starts peeing off the front of the building onto this busy street. I climb up there with him, and next thing you know, I see all these squad cars with their headlights off come surrounding the building. Then suddenly, from above is the spotlight from one of the police helicopters, and it's like, oh man, this is a bad deal, right? And so they get on the bullhorn and say, do we have to come up and get you, or are you going to come down? Well, we'll come down. They're like, do you two idiots know what you were on top of? And we weren't even thinking. They were like, you were on top of a bank. We were going to shoot you. We thought you were trying to rob the place. And so what they did say is, by the way, so I think I'm going to go to jail again. But what they did say is, if there's anybody that's with you who is sober, because I only lived about 2 miles down the street in Costa Mesa at that time, they said, we'll let them take you home. But if we catch you out again tonight, we're going to throw you in jail. And it's like, thank God I don't have to go to jail. But there again, I love to drink. So this couple that I had just met that evening, they said, we'll take you. And I talked them into driving me to a bar like 300 yards around the corner. Because that's what we do, right? We're not done until we're not done. It even got so bad that at one point in time, I was at a bar down in Newport Beach, and I thought I was being responsible that evening. So the buddy that I was with had a house that was right on the boardwalk on the Newport Beach Peninsula. And I told him, I'm way too drunk. I'm going to go over to your place. I'm going to crash. Well, I get over there, and his place is locked. So I go out on the beach. I pass out. Next thing you know, I've got all these flashing lights in my eyes, and I swear to God, I'm drunk, I'm coming to, I've got all these flashing lights. I thought I was getting abducted by aliens. But what I could see is I'm now surrounded by cops, and it's like, okay, here we go again, right? And so from where I passed out on the beach to his house wasn't even as far as from where I am to that back wall. And I'm telling him, he's probably back right now. Let's just go knock on his door. He'll identify me. He'll let me in. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that. So they throw me in the padded wagon, and here I go again. I'm in a drunk tank. Now I'm really angry. So I get in a fight with a guy in a drunk tank. And next thing you know, I got 4 officers pulling me off of him and throwing me in a padded cell. And they're like, sit down. And I'm like, I'm not sitting down. So all 4 of them come into the padded cell. They shut the door and they said, listen, do us a favor. Don't sit down. It's been a really slow evening, and if you don't sit down, we get to put you down any way we want to. And you can scream all you want in here. Nobody's going to hear you. And with all the broken bones that you're going to have and the bruises and the blood, you can go try to get an attorney, but we're 4 decorated officers with clean records, and we already got you on tape attacking another guy in the drunk tank. Do you want to take that chance? And the first thought that popped into my mind was, I bet you I can get his gun. And so what that told me is, this isn't all about the alcohol, because it wasn't the alcohol that put that in my brain. It's this warped thinking. It's this crazy mentality. Now, thank God I paused long enough not to go for his gun, because I probably wouldn't be talking to you here today, right? So what ended up then further happening is it got to a point I was on a business trip. I'm now 26 years old. I'm a mid-level marketing manager at this computer memory company. We're up in the East Bay of Northern California, up outside of Oakland. We had just thrown a big party for this sizable customer, and I talked 4 other employees into giving me the keys to the rental car, because it's 1:50 a.m. and I promised them I could find us a bar where we could drink because I wasn't done yet. And so unfortunately, either I was charming enough or they were either drunk enough that they decided to give me the keys. But I made it, less than a mile down the road, and I totaled the car into a street pole at a high rate of speed, took out the pole, put a big V-shaped wedge into the hood, pushed the engine block back into the car, and it's like, oh man, now I can't hide this one. Like, how am I going to explain this one? So when the police showed up, I fully confessed. I told them everything. And my attorney that I got for that DUI at the time, he's like, are you an idiot? He's like, I could have gotten you out of that. I could have gotten a reckless driving. Like, you gave them an airtight case. Why would you do that? And I said, because I need to stop me. This time it's a car and a pole. Thank God I didn't kill anybody. And so I ended up having to go to county jail outside of Oakland, Contra Costa County Jail outside of Oakland. It's up in Martinez. It's a lovely place. I don't recommend anybody spend any time there. And with the overcrowding in California, so I was put in Q module that was supposed to hold 40 guys. I was jammed in there with 120 guys. It was just bunk on top of bunk on top of bunk. The first two guys I meet are wanted for attempted murder, and I'm hanging out with gangbangers, and here I am. You know, this kid that went to a Jesuit all-boys school that came from a good family, and everything was supposed to go okay, and I drank myself into that situation. So fortunately, my company gave me the choice. Either walk away, we'll clean up this mess behind you, and we'll just part ways here if you're not done, or go get into treatment, go to AA, get well, and you can continue here. Now, I made the decision to get well, and the reason why I made the decision to get well is, in addition to the external pressures of being on the verge of losing my job, I was already tens of thousands of dollars in debt. I just totaled this car, so I found out I was going to lose my license for a year. I had talked to my parents for some help. They said, go away, we can't help you. You've told us multiple times before, you're going to stop, and yet we find ourselves here yet again. And so I had all these external pressures, but the main reason why I made a decision to go get well is because I was sick and tired of crawling out of my skin. I was sick and tired of trying to put on the image that's going to be pleasing to people, and that I could still get promotions at my job while I'm hating myself on the inside. I literally could not look at myself in the mirror for the last year of my drinking. I did not want to see who was going to be looking back at me. And so I made the decision to go get well. So I did a 90-day outpatient program at Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach. So I had to go Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 6 to 9 in the evening. I went to about 4 AA meetings a week, and I got my start at the Canyon Club in Laguna. If anybody knows Southern California at all, that's a phenomenal place to go to meetings, by the way. Always still a very special place to me that I like to go back, and I work 90 to 100 hours a week. I wouldn't recommend that most people do what I did, and I also lived alone, by the way. But what I knew is I was desperate. There was no way I was going back to that old life. Now, just wanting it is not enough. I knew I had to put in the work. I was desperate. When it talks about, in our literature, the desperation of drowning men, I still remember what that feels like 24 years later. Like, that's something you will never forget. That incomprehensible demoralization is not something you can ever forget. And so when I was thinking about coming here today, I'm thinking about, okay, I could talk about a number of things, but that desperation of drowning men, for whatever reason, what popped into my head was the Titanic. Now, with the Titanic, the real basic version of the story is a ship hit an iceberg and it sank. But that's not really what happened there. That's just like saying, okay, we got here just because of drinking. I know I didn't get here just because of drinking. I knew there was a whole host of different reasons that included detachment from God, detachment from healthy people, detachment from my own sense of self, some significantly warped thinking, and some horribly poor character. There was a whole host of things that got me here. So in the case of the Titanic, by the way, there was a series of events that it just led up to this ultimate incident where more than 1,500 people lost their lives. One is they were in a real hurry with this luxury liner of, hey, this is going to be our maiden voyage, we have to get out there. So instead of using steel rivets, they used wrought iron rivets. Well, what they didn't know, or what they didn't pay attention to, or what they didn't care is, yeah, it's great that they cost less, but under significant force, they are not going to hold up the way that steel rivets hold up. The second thing is when the ship took off, there was actually a roaring fire in one of the compartments. Now, it sounds like in the study that I did, it's somewhat standard at that time. This was the early 1900s, that ships are like, hey, we got to get somewhere, but if we can contain it in this compartment, as we're sailing along, we'll figure it out, we'll put the fire out, but we still need to get on to our destination. The problem is that roaring fire compromised the bulkheads of what it was in, and so the doors couldn't get that airtight seal, that waterproof seal that they needed when the ship was taking on water. The other part of it too is that they didn't have any radar or sonar at that time, but they did have wireless communication. Now, this was the luxury liner at the time. This was its maiden voyage, and so you had a whole bunch of millionaires there, and so the communication that they had at that time, they actually got communication from a ship that had gone out before them and warned them about what the ice was like at that point in time. And they basically told them, leave us alone. We need these airwaves to send out private messages for the rich and famous. And so that ship said, fine, we'll just turn off our radio. You can figure it out on your own. There was also a captain. His name was Captain Smith. He was known as the millionaire's captain. He had been the captain of other luxury liners, and so millionaires wanted to sail on his ship. He had a lot of pride. He had a lot of ego. And so all these different things had me thinking about what it was like in my situation. You know, before I made the decision to get well, those wrought iron rivets were like my character defects. I'm trying to hold my life together. I'm trying to look like this luxury liner on the outside, but I'm not doing a very good job on the inside. And I'm hoping that it all holds together while I'm sailing along on this journey. That roaring fire that's in that compartment, to me, is like trauma that we don't deal with. That we just think, you know what, at some point in time, I'll extinguish this and I'll just keep on my journey. I gotta look good. I can't stop. I don't have time to take care of this trauma. And what I know about unresolved trauma is you will drink again over it. If you do not deal with it, it will bring you down. You know, those airwaves, how many of us have ever had other people warn us, listen, you're charting yourself out into dangerous waters, and it's like, yeah, whatever. I don't have time to listen to you. And it just gets to a point where they're like, fine, I'll stop talking. Let's see what happens. I sure did that. You know, and that pride and that ego, that captain, was like my brain. It's like, okay, I was getting promotion after promotion after promotion. In the first 2 years at that company, I had 7 promotions. I thought, I'm on my way. I got this. I can figure this out. What I can tell you in my 24 years, of sobriety, I have not said once, I've got this. I know I don't have this. Here's what I also know, by the way, is I've lost everything twice in my life. The first time was because of my drinking. I drank everything away. The second time, by the way, was just a series of events. Things are going to happen to us in our sobriety. Sobriety is definitely better, but that doesn't mean our happy, joyous, and free does not mean we are not going to have conflicts or things to deal with. So after I had been at that company, I had made the decision, I'm not doing this anymore. That's a longer story, don't need to get into it, but I walked away from a VP position where I lived 5 minutes from Main Beach in Laguna. I was making a couple $100,000 a year. And so I moved my family here and I buy a fine dining restaurant. So I had a fine dining restaurant here for the first couple of years. I was married and I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at the time. And in the first year, my wife gets progressively ill. Now, my wife is a nurse. She decides to go back to Southern California where she wants to be around the medical community that she knows out there, and they diagnose her with a brain condition that requires a brain surgery. Now, she had a top neurosurgeon, but the problem is the human body does not always respond well. So she had complication after complication after complication. So instead of 1 surgery, she had 10. Instead of spending 4 days in the ICU, she spent more than 30. She even came back at one point in time and she starts leaking cerebral spinal fluid out at the backside of her neck. And it's like, man, we got to run you back there. So I'm trying to run a fine dining restaurant that I just sunk a whole bunch of my money into. My kids are now 3 and 5. We don't want them to see my wife because you don't want to see mom with her head shaved, tubes going into her brain, and the backside of her skull cut off, right? And I'm running back and forth between here in Southern California. While on one of the visits out there, we see her dad there, and we think her dad is coming to see her. But he tells us, I'm not here for you, I'm here for me. And we find out he's been diagnosed with cancer, but he didn't want to tell us because of what my wife is going through. And so while we're trying to go through this, while she is trying to heal, within a short period of time, her dad passes away. At the same time, we have a close friend who's deteriorating quickly because of drugs and alcohol. I tried to get him to come to meetings. I tried to get him to go to a program, and he said, no, I want to do it my way. And then a couple of days later, his mom and his sister are in my restaurant in tears saying he drank himself into a coma, and they have to make a decision on pulling the plug. And he passes away. About 4 months later, I see my brother, who had had a problem with heroin and alcohol and cocaine when he was younger. He went through 3 different programs, got sober for a couple of years. But then he had a medical condition, doctor wrote a prescription for him, and he was back off to the races. So he's doctor hopping, pharmacy shopping, finding any ways that he can find pills. I'm getting calls from his wife on a regular basis in tears, where she's saying, I'm finding all these empty pill bottles. So I see my brother. I spend about 4 hours with him, trying to get him to just say 2 words, please help. I said, Andy, just say 2 words, please help. I will smooth things out with your wife. I will smooth things out with your work. I will take care of whatever needs to get taken care of, but you need to get into a program like right now. You don't have long. You're going to be dead. And he too said, I got to do it my way. And then 30 days later, 1 o'clock in the morning, after I closed up the restaurant and I'm just starting to doze off, I get a call at 1 o'clock in the morning. His wife is frantic. She's crying and screaming, and all that she can finally get out is he won't wake up. And an EMT, as plain as day, gets on the phone and just says, how soon can you get here? Your brother's dead. Follow that up with the worst market crash in 80 years. I have to sell my restaurant at a loss. When I showed up in this town, I had $500,000 in cash. Now, because of all the medical bills, selling my restaurant at a loss and all of that, I'm looking at $3.48 as a married guy with a mortgage and a family. At the same time, I have chronic back pain because of 2 blown out herniated discs, that I had been going to physical therapy, that I had been getting injections in my back, that I had been taking nerve blockers. Nothing was working. I wasn't sleeping well. And so I go in for back surgery and it doesn't go well. And because of all this that we were going on, this was all happening at the same time, by the way. And with all of this going on, my wife and I split apart. So a lot of people, we can relapse off of just a major medical issue. Yes? We can relapse over significant financial changes. We can relapse over people dying on us. We can relapse over the loss of a marriage. I had it all going on at the same time. And before I sold my restaurant at a loss, one of my regular customers, he asked me and he said, why are you still smiling? I asked him, I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, I know what you're going through. And if I didn't know what you were going through, based upon what I see, because I would run front of the house, he says, based upon what I'd see, I think you don't have a care in the world. And I know you're going through hell right now. He's like, so why are you still smiling? Are you drinking again? And I said, no, it's true. It's really tough. But people aren't going to come to a fine dining restaurant so I can dump my problems on them. They're coming here for a good experience, so I'm here to provide that. I said, yeah, it is tough. But thank God I'm sober going through this. Because that was a very tragic couple of years, but it would have been absolute hell had I taken a drink. It wouldn't have solved a damn thing, but it would have tortured a whole bunch of other people. You know, I picture my wife. She had just been through multiple brain surgeries and had just lost her dad and our friend and my brother. What would have gone through her mind if her husband took a drink over that? Like, how do I handle this, right? I also think about my brother when he OD'd and died. My parents, by the way, I joke are like Warden June Cleaver for the older people in the group here. Like, my parents are so straight-laced. I've seen them take one drink in their whole lifetime, never did a drug, never got in trouble with the law, and then they got a kid like me. And so when my brother OD'd and died, it made absolutely no sense to them. Like, it's like a completely foreign concept. Absolutely foreign. I am so grateful that I stayed sober and I could be of service to my parents in their greatest moment of need. That I could answer some of that why for them so it didn't torture them as much as it used to torture them. I wouldn't have been able to do that had I taken a drink. Can you imagine what it would have been like for my parents to lose a son for an OD, and at that time I was 10, almost 11 years sober, if the other one had relapsed? That would have been absolute torture for them. And even though I was suffocating, it felt like I was suffocating under all this weight, what I told this gentleman is I said, you know, in addition to the fact that I'm really grateful for being sober, I'm really grateful I got a relationship with my higher power, with God today. I could not go through that alone. And I said, the reality of the situation is there's 7.5 billion people on this planet. I can guarantee you with everything I got going on right now, there's still 6 billion people who would trade spots with me in an instant. They're like, I'll take your problems. You want my problems? And so I remember, don't be a statistic. Don't quit. Don't give up. This won't last forever. That saying that we have, this too shall pass. And it's like, man, I hope it hurries up and passes real quick. I don't know how much more of this I can take. So in that situation, by the way, separate from my wife and I splitting up, I didn't create any of that. Life sometimes just has those obstacles in front of us. Sometimes they're little obstacles, but sometimes there are those big old icebergs that can tear a hole right in your life and change things in your course about what your plans were. I know they did to mine. Like when I walked away from that VP position, I hadn't seen any of this coming. I didn't know it was going to happen, couldn't possibly predict it. But what I was also grateful for, by the way, is I work on me every day. Because what I know is 24 years can disappear too. I know people who have lost 30 years. What I know as well is that this too shall pass is not just about the negative things that are going on in our life. It's also about the good times too. When the good times are happening, it's like, you know, not to put a sour note on them, but this too shall pass too. Like challenges are going to come. If I am not working on me, when those challenges arrive, that's the wrong time to figure out how to deal with them. If I work on me on a daily basis, which I do, it builds up a strength in me that when these challenges come, that it's like, okay, the best I can do at that particular time is turn myself over to my training and see it through. I use the analogy, it's kind of like getting in a fight. Now, I used to love to fight. Like back in my drinking days, and I'm sorry if it's a little crude, but if in an evening I could drink, fight, and have sex, that was like a perfect evening for me, right? So I used to love to fight, but what I know about fighting, the wrong time to learn how to fight is while you're in the middle of a fight. Like you don't get to call time out and say, hey, I need to go learn how to fight, and then I'll come back and fight you, right? It's the same thing with life. Life is going to come at us. It is going to happen. And so with working on me, by the way, I don't do it out of massive fear. I do it out of a respectful fear for my disease and my illness, which is more than just the alcohol. If it were just about the alcohol, what I know is alcohol would be mentioned more than just one time and just in the first step. What I also know about it is if it were just about alcohol, this book, which is a manual for living, would be one page that just says, don't drink, you dummy, right? But there's so much more of what we need to work on. I needed to work on reattaching myself to God. I needed to work on what did I create? Take extreme ownership for that. The wreckage of that situation, of what I created. If I tried to act as a victim or say it was everybody else's fault, there is no way I would get well. Not possible. I had to do a searching and fearless moral inventory of myself. I had to have the integrity of admitting it fully to God, to myself, and to another human being, and then get to work on those character defects. Those character defects, to me, are just like hidden landmines or like cancerous tumors inside of me. I got to go root those things out. Otherwise, my journey forward is wrought with all kinds of danger. I also got to go back and make those amends to other people. I don't want to hurt them anymore. And so part of that is I need to make the amends, because what I also know about trauma is unresolved trauma isn't just about get over it. You carry that hurt forward. And I caused that damage to a number of other people. And then it's also about that daily inventory. What's going on in my life? I don't want to be so quick or so focused on the wrong things, like I'm that Titanic. I just want to put a good, pretty shell on everything. It's like, no, I need to diligently go to work on an inside job. And just like step 11, I'm going to go back and turn my will and my life over to the care of God through prayer and meditation. I got to stop being the captain of my own journey. And I hopefully am no longer that ship that people need to come to rescue, but I actually can be of service to go out there and help throw a lifeline to somebody who else may be drowning. That's huge for me. Like, since my time being out here, by the way, I've owned a number of other businesses, and it all doesn't matter. I work in this field. I've worked with about 900 people in the last 9 years. And I've worked anywhere from the 18-year-old that has very little life skills to the owners of businesses and some very high-profile people. Our illness doesn't care. I can't think I'm so special that it won't happen to me, because it did. And I also know that if I don't continue to work on me, it'll come back. The skills that we learn, the principles that are behind those steps, by the way, are perishable. It tells us in our literature to practice these principles in all of our affairs. I have known people that could recite this to me, but they didn't practice it and they're dead today. Knowing all the words aren't going to save you. It's like I got to put it into practice. There's actually a biological reason for that as well, without going too far off course. Neuroplasticity, us rewiring our brains. Just knowing is not enough. Self-knowledge availed us nothing. Yes, we do need to know what to do so we can make sure that we're aiming in the right direction, but it is in the doing that we rewire this brain, that we will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. If I don't study and if I don't put it into practice on a regular basis, I know what's inside of me. That crazy will come back. That guy every once in a while wants to pop up. One of the things I'm grateful for, by the way, is I met my wife 2 years and 1 month into my sobriety. 2 years and 1 month into my sobriety. I'm very grateful that my wife and my kids have never seen that old me. Now, I met my wife through her younger brother because I used to work with him at that computer memory company. And so he saw me in the last couple of years of my drinking and the first couple of years of my sobriety. We had a lot of friends in common. So she said, this guy is so responsible. Like, I want to hear some of the stories of what it was like when he was drinking. I remember a couple of months into us dating, she said to me, she said, I'd like to see you drink one time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she had no idea what she was asking for. And I used the analogy for her. I said, that's like asking Bruce Banner to let out this green guy called the Hulk. Like, just let him out a little bit. Let me see who he is, because I've always kind of heard about him, right? But once you let the Hulk out, the Hulk is out. He's not going to be done until the damage is done, right? And I told her, like, you have no idea what you're asking for. You really don't. It just proves you're not one of us, because if you were, yeah, you'd be laughing like everybody else. It's like, yeah, you're as insane as I am, but for different reasons, right? So, you know, getting back then to a couple of steps. There are steps up here, but you have to do them. You can't just read them. You can't just think about them. You have to be committed to being thorough about them. It's read at the beginning of every meeting. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. In doing this work, by the way, I have seen a number of people go back out, unfortunately. And to me, what it's like is people getting out of the lifeboat that is ready to go away from the Titanic, and they want to swim back in because they remember how they think those rooms were just so nice in the Titanic. And it's like, yeah, but that whole thing's going down. Right? The other thing that I also know is in our first tradition, it talks about unity. We are in a lifeboat together. We are to work together. It doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter what you've accomplished. We have a singleness of purpose. And if we don't stick together and work together, it's real easy for this to all come apart. We are here to help each other. Yeah, we're going to have our differences. Yeah, we're not going to like everybody. It's not the point. I've had that desperation of almost dying a couple of times. And if there's anybody else in the room that's been at that point, at that moment in time, you don't care what the other person's story is other than, do you know anything about this, and how do we work together to make sure I don't die? And if I can help you and make sure you don't die too, God bless. Right? So, I do the steps, even now. I work on one thing a day. I always pick one thing a day, because what I also know is I didn't get to 24 years in just one big leap. It was 24 hours. Day in and day out, day in and day out, just 24 hours at a time. So every morning I pick a little something of 12-step literature that I focus on for the day, and I'll read for you what I grabbed this morning. Out of the big book, it says, well, that's exactly what the book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself which will solve your problem. That means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, that we are going to talk about God. I thirst for a relationship with my higher power. I seek my higher power out. I spend time with my higher power on a daily basis. I used to go to my higher power after I tried everything and then see, could my higher power be like this genie that I could just rub a lamp and would come in and clean up all my messes behind me. There's the old adage, you are the sum average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. God is one of my 5. And instead of going to God last, I go to God first. I seek out, God, what do you want from me? I seek out, am I on the right course? Because I'll go get lost. One of the things that I know is alcoholism isn't my only ism. I have workaholism too. I will use being a workaholic as a numbing agent, and I will try to justify why that's okay, and I will go get lost again. The resentments will pop up, the frustration, the loneliness, the despair, the detachment, and I'll justify it while I'm doing something good. And it's like, no, you're lost. I get to work on my character defects. I get to work on my warped thinking, because what I know is when I blend my warped thinking with my character defects, I'll pop unhealthy emotions and unhealthy actions. I can't just take a pill to make the unhealthy emotions and the unhealthy actions to go away. It doesn't mean I'm anti-medication. I do believe some people definitely need to be on medication. But I also know the medication alone is not enough. I got to get after that warped thinking, and I got to get after that poor character. There isn't a pill that's going to take me from being a liar to make me honest. I have to choose to get to work on it. Yes? I'll even challenge myself. If you ever saw the movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey, where he was like forced to tell the truth even when he didn't want to, it's like, try telling the truth for a full day, just for 24 hours. See what it does for you, because here's what I know. If I practice my character defects, they bring friends. And if I practice my character assets, they bring friends too. So if I'm lying, I'm also manipulating, I'm probably procrastinating, I'm probably got some resentment and some fear somewhere, and it's like, what am I hanging out with these dudes for? But if I practice honesty, I'm also going to be practicing integrity, hope, faith, courage. And it's like, those are the people I want to be hanging out with. But I got to practice them in order to be able to have them and have them in my life. And so I practice one thing a day. Here's what I do, though, is I don't try to change everything at once. That'll just create overwhelm, and I'm just setting myself up for a failure. I aim big and I start small. So I created a definition of the best version of me, which is 100% character driven and 100% in my control. Because I don't just want to get away from the old life. I have to get to something better with purpose. If I don't, it's easy to get lost and it's easy to go back. But now that I got that big grand scheme of what to go after, it's like, okay, start small, Doug. So if I want to practice, like if I want to expand my prayer life, to say, hey, you'll get closer to God if you pray 8 hours a day. I'm going to do that 1 or 2 days and then I'm going to quit. That's not realistic, right? It's like, but will you start with 2 minutes? And I believe in drafting and grafting. Where can I draft it in my day that it's not in conflict with anything else, and graft it to something that you already always do, so it will be a reminder, like Pavlov's dog. When you do that thing, it will remind you to do this one action. And so for me, it's like, okay, I'll do it in the shower. I'm alone. People leave me alone. I can let the water pour over me. I can use that as a way to meditate and pray. And I've got the time. And when I do 2 minutes a day, and that's enough, it's like, okay, I'll find another slide. I'll add another 2 minutes somewhere. And 2 minutes over a short period of time turns into 10 minutes. Over another short period of time turns into 20 minutes. That's the healthier growth pattern for me. If I lose that connection to God, I will get lost and I will wreck my life all over again. That I am absolutely certain of. There are a number of sayings that we have here in AA, and the slogans are only as good as we use them. One of the slogans, by the way, that I absolutely hate, that I've heard people in recovery say, is relapse is part of recovery. And I hear people use that in a very lazy way, like giving themselves permission. Well, you know, relapse is part of recovery. It doesn't have to be. It hasn't been part of my story, thank God. I've introduced myself one time as a newcomer, and I've only had to introduce myself one time, and I'm not saying that from a prideful or egotistical standpoint. I'm actually very humble and grateful for that. I'm grateful that my higher power has flipped a switch in my brain saying, don't go back at any cost. Drinking is death. I'm grateful for the people that are in the lifeboat with me. I love coming to AA meetings. It was great from everybody go away to people are like glad to see you. And we're all nuts, right? It's like, thank God, my people. And so I am also grateful for this process and what it taught me. Because I used to be too smart. I used to be too good that I thought I didn't need this and I could figure it out. And thank God that taught me something. Thanks for letting me share.
All right, let's thank Doug one more time.